You must understand this truth. When a super empath entrusts you with their heart, it is not a game, it is not a test of ego, it is a sacred covenant. They see into your soul before you even see yourself. They feel the tremors of your intentions, the quiet motives you hide from the world, and still they choose to connect. To betray such a gift is not merely a lapse, it is a wound to the very essence of trust. Some think avoidance shields them, that detachment protects them from the consequences of their choices. But listen carefully. The universe does not negotiate with cowardice. Betrayal against a super empath is not a fleeting incident. It echoes through time, through spirit, through every action you take after. Every step you attempt to move forward will be met by the weight of the bridge you burned, the sacred bond you dismissed. Avoidance, you fear depth because it exposes you. You betray because vulnerability terrifies you. And yet the super empath, in their infinite grace, does not collapse, they rise. They convert pain into purpose, betrayal into wisdom, heartbreak into insight. They transform what you rejected into the very foundation of their power. And here lies the divine irony. While they ascend, you remain tethered to your own actions, trapped in the mirror of your choices, unable to retrieve what you discarded. Do not mistake this for punishment. It is consequence, it is natural law, it is divine truth. The empath's gift was yours to honor. Instead, you fractured it. Now you are left with the echo of something profound, something irreplaceable, something that cannot be recreated. No apology, no rationalization, no fleeting charm will undo the spiritual contract you broke. Know this, the world moves forward. Hearts heal, souls expand, but the avoidant who betrays a super empath cannot reclaim what they refuse to cherish. They are left to wander within the corridors of their own fear, guilt, and unprocessed truth, while the super empath walks freely in clarity, in purpose, in power. This is not a lesson in revenge. It is a lesson in alignment. Align your actions with your soul before it is too late. Honor the trust placed in you before it is gone forever. For the empath who gave you their heart will transform that betrayal into light, and you will remain behind. A testament to the cost of avoidance. Rise above fear. Choose integrity. The avoidant may stumble, but the empath soars, and the universe ensures this balance is maintained. When a super empath encounters another person, they are not merely interacting on a surface level. They are perceiving the invisible, the unspoken, the energies that weave through the soul. Their perception goes beyond words, gestures, and appearances. It penetrates to the very essence of who someone is. Unlike ordinary empathy, which responds to feelings in the moment, the super empath senses patterns, motives, and intentions that often remain hidden even from the individual themselves. When an avoidant enters the life of a super empath, the empath can immediately sense the undercurrents of fear, hesitation, and self-protection that drive avoidance. They recognize the walls, the shields, and the subtle deflections. Yet, despite knowing this, super empaths often extend trust and connection because their nature is not rooted in suspicion, but in the transformative power of understanding and compassion. This creates a dynamic where the avoidant is met with a depth of perception they are unprepared to navigate. When betrayal occurs, it leaves a mark that is profound precisely because the super empath had already seen the potential for deception or withdrawal before it manifested in action. The avoidant may believe they have hidden their intentions or masked their true nature, but the empath has already sensed the misalignment. The initial trust given is not naive, it is a conscious choice made with awareness of the risks, a deliberate act of faith in human connection. The act of betrayal is therefore not simply a broken promise or a single misdeed. It is a rupture against a being who recognized the entire trajectory of the situation and still chose to engage with the avoidant openly. The depth of understanding that the super empath brings to relationships magnifies the impact of the betrayal, because it is not just a violation of trust, it is a violation of something sacred, something fundamentally recognized as pure, and something freely offered with no expectation of manipulation or harm. The super empath's awareness means that the avoidant cannot simply erase or move past the betrayal without consequence. Unlike relationships governed by superficial interaction or temporary emotion, the connection with a super empath operates on a plane where energy, intention, and truth are indelible. Every action has a resonance. Every betrayal echoes beyond the moment. The avoidant might attempt to rationalize, minimize, or justify their behavior, but the empath already knows the entirety of the pattern. The empath's perception allows them to see the underlying fear, the unresolved wounds, and the defensive mechanisms that drove the avoidant to act in ways that were hurtful. In this sense, the avoidant cannot genuinely escape the truth of their actions because the empath has already internalized and processed it. This creates a permanent record in the spiritual and emotional space of the relationship, a record that the avoidant cannot rewrite or erase. Furthermore, the super empath's ability to perceive deeply extends to the consequences of the betrayal itself. They sense not only the act, but the ripple effects it will have on both parties. They recognize how the avoidant will be confronted with their own choices, how guilt and shame will arise, and how their patterns of avoidance and self-protection will be challenged in ways they cannot control. The empath sees the potential for transformation and consequences that the avoidant cannot fully anticipate. The depth of insight is such that the super empath experiences the betrayal with full awareness of its spiritual, emotional, and energetic significance. They are not blindsided, they understand the implications, yet they honor their own process of engagement and trust. This level of perception also means that healing for the avoidant is exceptionally difficult because the super empath has already recognized the underlying issues that led to the betrayal. The avoidant cannot simply apologize and hope to return to the previous state. The empath's insight has already illuminated the patterns that must be confronted, patterns that the avoidant may not even have fully acknowledged themselves. The empath's vision, combined with their refusal to settle for surface-level reconciliation, creates a situation in which the avoidant must face profound internal reckoning. They are confronted not just with the consequences of their actions, but with the truth of who they are and why they acted in a way that betrayed someone who saw them so completely. In essence, the super empath's ability to see beyond surface lies is both their gift and the avoidance obstacle. The empath engages from a place of wisdom and discernment, which transforms trust into something sacred. When that trust is betrayed, the avoidant cannot simply recover or move forward without encountering the very truths they tried to avoid. The act of betrayal against such a perceptive and conscious being is an event with spiritual, emotional, and energetic permanence. The super empath's awareness ensures that the consequences of deception are neither fleeting nor superficial, and the avoidant is left with the stark reality that their actions have been fully witnessed and internally processed by someone who cannot be fooled or undone. The depth of the super empath's perception, their ability to see beyond surface lies, creates a sacred dynamic in which trust and betrayal are magnified. It is not merely a human transaction. It is an encounter of energies and intentions, a meeting of awareness and avoidance, and a demonstration of how conscious perception carries power that the avoidant cannot escape or recover from. This is the divine truth of the super empath's gift: to see, to feel, and to honor the essence of others, and to make sure that those who betray them face the full measure of the reality they tried to conceal. For a super empath, trust is not a casual, fleeting thing. It is sacred. It is not built on superficial promises or conditional agreements. It is woven from the threads of intuition, emotional insight, and spiritual discernment. When a super empath extends trust to someone, especially an avoidant, it is a conscious act of faith that carries tremendous weight. This trust is a reflection of their divine understanding that connection is a higher purpose, a vehicle through which human souls can learn, grow, and evolve. It is not given lightly, nor is it given without profound awareness of the person before them. When an avoidant receives this trust, they are receiving not just the confidence of another human being, but an offering of emotional and spiritual truth, a truth that has been discerned, embraced, and shared with care. To betray that trust is to violate not just an interpersonal bond, but a sacred energetic exchange. The sacredness of trust in the eyes of a super empath means that once it is broken, it cannot simply be patched over. Avoidants, by nature, often approach relationships with self-preservation, emotional distancing, and fear of vulnerability. They may believe that apologies, rationalizations, or gestures can restore the equilibrium after betrayal, but they underestimate the depth at which the empath experiences trust. Trust for a super empath is not transactional. It is an ongoing energetic commitment. When that commitment is violated, the empath does not simply feel the sting of deception. They perceive the fracture in the connection on multiple levels, emotionally, spiritually, and even energetically. This fracture leaves a mark that is permanent, a testament to the gravity of breaking a bond that was treated as sacred from the start. The avoidant's inability to fully recover from such betrayal stems from their own relationship with trust. Many avoidants fear emotional closeness, seeing vulnerability as a threat to their safety. When they betray a super empath, they inadvertently trigger the empath's deep awareness of their fear and avoidance. The empath senses the root causes of the betrayal, the insecurities, the self-protective mechanisms, the inability to face authentic intimacy. This awareness ensures that the act of betrayal is never just a single moment. It becomes a reflection of the avoidant's internal patterns, a mirror that confronts them with the truth they have long avoided. Because they cannot face these truths without significant inner work, they remain caught in the consequences of their own actions, unable to move forward in the same way they might in a more superficial relationship. Another dimension of this sacred trust is the empath's capacity for discernment and foresight. A super empath often senses the potential for betrayal before it happens, perceiving the subtle energies and intentions that might lead someone to act in ways that harm. Yet, despite this foresight, they extend trust because their purpose is not to manipulate or control, but to engage with the world from a place of authenticity and openness. When the avoidant betrays that trust, they are confronted not only with the immediate consequences of their actions, but with the fact that the empath knowingly engaged with them in spite of the risks. This amplifies the weight of betrayal because it is not just the act itself that is significant, but the context in which it occurred. The conscious choice of the empath to trust, knowing the vulnerabilities of the avoidant. The sacred nature of trust also ensures that the empath's response is transformative rather than purely reactive. While they may feel pain, disappointment, and heartbreak, they do not allow the betrayal to diminish their understanding of human connection. Instead, they elevate it, transforming the experience into wisdom and clarity. This transformation underscores the permanence of the avoidance loss. The empath emerges stronger, more discerning, and more aligned with their purpose, while the avoidant remains confronted with the consequences of having violated something that cannot be replaced. The avoidant may attempt to reconcile, but the depth of what was lost, the sacred trust, the spiritual alignment, the emotional openness, cannot simply be restored. Trust, in the realm of a super empath, is a bridge to deeper connection, intimacy, and understanding. When it is given fully, with awareness of the other person's energy and potential. When it is broken, it becomes a spiritual and emotional marker that cannot be undone. The avoidant cannot wreck over fully because they have severed access to a realm of connection they were never meant to manipulate or betray. They are left outside, facing the permanence of their choices, while the empath continues to walk forward with the clarity and empowerment that comes from having honored the sacred nature of trust. The lesson here is profound. Trust is not simply a social contract. It is a divine principle. To betray it is to violate the natural order of human and spiritual connection. Super empaths do not forget, they do not regress. They rise, transform, and preserve the sanctity of their emotional and spiritual boundaries. Avoidants, by contrast, cannot reclaim what they have dismissed, because trust once sacred is not a commodity. It is a spiritual covenant that marks the difference between those who honor it and those who do not. When a betrayal occurs, it is never an isolated event. In the case of a super empath, Every action reverberates far beyond the immediate moment, carrying with it consequences that are spiritual, emotional, and karmic. Avoidants often underestimate the weight of their choices because they live in a realm of detachment, thinking that distancing themselves from responsibility shields them from the full impact of their actions. But the universe operates on principles far deeper than avoidance can reach. There is a natural law, a cosmic equilibrium, that ensures every action has a consequence, every betrayal leaves a mark, and every broken trust is accounted for in ways that cannot be bypassed. When an avoidant betrays a super empath, they trigger a chain reaction that extends beyond the human eye, a ripple that touches their own soul, their emotional reality, and even the patterns of energy that shape their future. The avoidant may believe that their detachment or rationalization can erase what has been done, that the super empath will simply forgive and forget. But the reality is that betrayal against someone who perceives and feels at such a deep level cannot be treated as superficial. Super empaths operate on awareness that extends to the emotional and energetic consequences of every choice. They sense the intentions behind actions and the unseen repercussions that may unfold. When trust is violated, the avoidant does not simply confront human disappointment, they face the weight of universal consequence, whether they recognize it or not. Their actions set in motion events that reflect back to them the reality they tried to escape, forcing them to reckon with the patterns they have long avoided. This principle of cause and effect is not punitive in nature. It is corrective and revealing. The avoidant's betrayal against a super empath creates a mirror in which they are confronted with their own inner fears, insecurities, and avoidance patterns. The empath's perception magnifies what the avoidant attempted to hide. Their betrayal cannot be undone because it has already left an imprint on the empath's consciousness, and simultaneously, it imprints on the avoidant's own psyche. Guilt, shame, and the subtle but unrelenting tension of unresolved responsibility begin to accumulate, creating an invisible weight that cannot be ignored. Every choice that follows is influenced by this energetic mark, guiding the avoidant toward lessons they may not yet be prepared to learn. Avoidants, by design, fear the depth of emotional engagement and struggle with intimacy. Their betrayal of a super empath therefore triggers a profound internal reckoning. The empath's awareness ensures that the avoidant cannot escape the truth. They must confront the reality of what they have done and face themselves in the process. The universe will not allow a betrayal of this magnitude to pass without consequence, because the act disrupts the ateral order of connection and alignment. Avoidants who attempt to bypass this reckoning often find themselves trapped in repetitive cycles of avoidance, relationships, and emotional discomfort, because the underlying imbalance has not been addressed. Moreover, the spiritual consequences of betrayal extend beyond personal reflection. The energy that has been misaligned must find resolution. Super empaths, through their grace and awareness, convert the pain into clarity, growth, and protection. The avoidant, however, remains tethered to the aftermath. They cannot simply restore what was broken because they have interfered with a sacred flow of trust and empathy that moves beyond the physical into the energetic and spiritual realms. The law of cause and effect ensures that while the empath heals and transforms, the avoidant faces the reverberations of their own choices, often experiencing them in subtle, persistent ways that shape their life and relationships. Betrayal against a super empath is therefore never just a momentary misstep. It is an energetic event with universal significance. It teaches that avoidance and deception cannot circumvent natural law, that every action is accounted for, and that spiritual balance demands recognition and integration of what has been done. The avoidant may try to rationalize, distract themselves, or escape into superficial engagements, but the consequences remain: a silent, unavoidable echo of the sacred trust they violated. The divine principle at play here is simple, yet profound. Actions against a super empath carry weight because they are measured not just in human terms, but in universal alignment. Avoidants cannot recover simply because the universe has already responded, and their own soul must reckon with the disturbance they created. While the empath grows, transforms, and ascends from the experience, the avoidant is left, to navigate the landscape of consequence, facing truths they cannot ignore and lessons they cannot avoid. In this way, betrayal becomes a mirror, a teacher, and an immutable truth, demonstrating that every choice carries spiritual consequence, especially when it violates the sacred trust of someone who sees and feels more deeply than ordinary perception allows. Avoidants are people who naturally fear emotional depth. Their very survival instinct is rooted in avoidance. They shy away from intimacy, from vulnerability, from the raw exposure of self that a truly connected relationship demands. This fear is not always conscious. Often, it is a subtle, unspoken current that drives decisions, shapes interactions, and dictates behaviors. When an avoidant enters the life of a super empath, this fear becomes the silent antagonist in the relationship. The super empath, with their heightened perception, senses these layers of avoidance immediately. They understand the protective mechanisms, the walls built over years of self-preservation, and the hidden insecurities that the avoidant may never articulate. The empath engages nonetheless, trusting in the higher purpose of connection, offering space, understanding, and unconditional recognition. But betrayal triggers a confrontation the avoidant is ill-prepared to face. A confrontation not just with the empath, but with the emotional reality they have long evaded. Avoidants fear intimacy because intimacy demands surrender, it demands honesty, vulnerability, and accountability. They fear that if they truly expose themselves, they will be judged, abandoned, or overwhelmed. Super empaths do not just demand this surface-level exposure, they perceive the soul beneath it. They feel the unspoken fears, the emotional debts, the hidden wounds. When an avoidant betrays a super empath, they are forced to confront these very fears in a way that is unavoidable. The act of betrayal cannot erase the empath's insight, and the avoidant cannot hide behind rationalizations or distractions. The universe and the empath's perceptive presence ensures that the avoidant is confronted with the emotional truth they have always sought to escape. The betrayal of a super empath is a mirror that reflects the avoidant's deepest insecurities. They may attempt to justify their actions, to downplay the impact, to rationalize their avoidance as necessity or self-preservation, but the mirror cannot lie. It reflects the consequences of their fear-driven choices with brutal clarity. They see not only the pain inflicted on another, but also the consequences for themselves, the guilt, the self-recrimination, the loss of connection, and the permanent rupture of trust. This is not punishment. It is the natural reckoning of avoidance meeting its own limitation. They are forced to witness the very reality they were trying to evade. That fear cannot coexist with genuine connection, and betrayal cannot erase the truth. Furthermore, avoidants struggle because their avoidance is often habitual. It is a deeply ingrained survival pattern developed over years, sometimes decades, in response to trauma or neglect. When this habitual avoidance is confronted by the betrayal of a super empath, it triggers an inner crisis. The avoidant is suddenly faced with the consequences of a life lived partially in shadows, emotional depth deferred, relationships manipulated, opportunities for growth bypassed. The empath's awareness amplifies this confrontation because they perceive not just the act of betrayal, but the underlying avoidance that enabled it. Avoidants cannot fully recover because they are being asked to face patterns they have long denied, patterns that the empath has seen clearly and honored with trust they betrayed. The fear of emotional depth also ensures that avoidants cannot fully process the consequences of their betrayal. They may attempt to numb themselves, distract themselves, or seek solace in superficial interactions, but the unresolved truth remains. The empath has sensed and understood the full context of their fear-driven behavior, and this understanding cannot be undone. While the empath can transform the pain into growth and clarity, the avoidant is left trapped in the cycle of avoidance, confronted by both the external reality of their lost trust and the internal reality of their unaddressed fears. Ultimately, the betrayal of a super empath forces avoidants into an existential confrontation with themselves. Their avoidance, once a shield, becomes a barrier they cannot hide behind. The empath's perception combined with the unavoidable consequences of the act, demands that the avoidant face emotional truths they have long resisted. The fear of emotional depth that has governed their life now becomes the obstacle to their own healing and recovery. They cannot reclaim what they have lost, and they cannot avoid the reality of their own inner limitations. The empath, having engaged with awareness and grace, transcends the betrayal, while the avoidant is left to grapple with the truths they have long evaded, learning in the most challenging way that avoidance is never a solution to emotional reality. Super empaths do not operate on memory alone, they operate on transformation. When they experience betrayal, they do not simply store pain as resentment or bitterness. They process it, elevate it, and integrate it into the very fabric of their being. Their awareness allows them to see beyond the immediate hurt, perceiving the lessons, patterns, and spiritual growth embedded in the experience. While ordinary individuals might be consumed by the betrayal itself, super empaths convert it into wisdom. They feel the depth of the wound, but use it as a catalyst to expand their emotional and spiritual capacity, to strengthen boundaries, and to refine discernment. This ability to transcend pain makes them extraordinary, but it also ensures that the avoidant who betrayed them cannot reclaim what was lost. The empath has moved through the experience with consciousness and purpose, transforming the energy of betrayal into something indestructible, while the avoidant remains trapped in the consequences of their choices. The process of transcendence for a super empath is multifaceted. First, they allow themselves to fully feel the emotional impact. They do not deny, suppress, or minimize the pain. Every nuance, every subtle wave of hurt is acknowledged and absorbed into their consciousness. By allowing the full spectrum of emotion to be experienced, they avoid the stagnation of unresolved trauma. But they do not stop at feeling. They analyze, reflect, and integrate the experience into a higher understanding of self and others. This is where the power of a super empath becomes apparent. They convert vulnerability into strength. The betrayal becomes not a shackle, but a teacher, a mirror that reveals both the nature of the other and the expansiveness of their own capacity to rise above harm. Avoidants, in contrast, do not typically process events at this depth. They may attempt to rationalize their actions or distract themselves from guilt and shame, but they cannot perceive the layers of consequence that the empathic experiences. The super empath sees the patterns of avoidance, the fear, and the self-sabotage behind the betrayal. While the avoidant may not even fully comprehend the depth of their own motives, this discrepancy in awareness is a fundamental reason why the avoidant cannot recover fully. The empath's evolution continues grounded in wisdom and insight, while the avoidant is left to confront a reality they cannot fully grasp. They are tethered to the moment of betrayal in a way that is both psychological and spiritual, because they failed to honor a bond that was sacred and transformative. The transformative nature of a super empath also ensures that they establish unbreakable boundaries after betrayal. Their transcendence is not passive forgiveness, it is active growth. They recognize what is safe, what aligns with their soul, and what must be released. The avoidant, who attempted to manipulate or escape accountability, finds themselves permanently excluded from the realm of emotional depth they once had access to. No apology, charm, or superficial reconciliation can breach the evolved state of the empath. The betrayal has not only failed to harm their growth, it has catalyzed it. The empath emerges stronger, more aware, and more aligned with their purpose, embodying a resilience that is both inspiring and unassailable. Another aspect of the super empath's transcendence is the clarity it brings. The pain of betrayal illuminates truth in ways that ordinary interactions cannot. They see who they are, what they value, and the types of connections that are worthy of their energy. They recognize the patterns in others that either uplift or harm, allowing them to navigate relationships with precision and intention. Avoidants, by contrast, are left with a lingering sense of loss and the inability to reconstruct what they destroyed. The empath's clarity ensures that the avoidant cannot regain the access, trust, or influence they once had, because the empath's understanding has moved far beyond the superficialities of past connection. Ultimately, the super empath's ability to transcend betrayal is a testament to the transformative power of conscious awareness. They do not dwell in the pain, they rise from it, converting what was meant to woe unto wisdom, empowerment, and alignment with their higher purpose. This transcendence is what makes the avoidance loss permanent. While the empath elevates, the avoidant remains in the shadow of their own fear and avoidance, confronted by the irreversibility of the bond they violated. The super empath's evolution is unstoppable, their insight unshakable, and their strength undeniable, leaving the avoidant unable to reclaim the profound connection they betrayed. When an avoidant betrays a super empath, the consequences are not limited to the external rupture of trust. They reverberate inward, creating a psychological and spiritual weight that is difficult to escape. Avoidants often think they can evade accountability, that by retreating or rationalizing, they can sidestep the emotional impact of their actions. But betrayal leaves a mark that is invisible yet inescapable, a lingering presence that manifests as guilt, shame, and internal conflict. This weight is not superficial. It penetrates their consciousness, shaping their thoughts, behaviors, and future interactions. They may try to suppress it, divert attention, or seek temporary distractions, but the energy of what they have done remains. It is an unseen prison because it is not bound by walls. They carry it within themselves, embedded in their own psyche, constantly reminding them of the sacred bond they violated and the depth of trust they rejected. Guilt, in particular, becomes a persistent companion. Unlike ordinary remorse, which can fade over time, the guilt experienced after betraying a super empath is profound because it is intertwined with the empath's awareness. Super empaths perceive the full spectrum of human intention and energy, and their perception cannot be erased or ignored. The avoidant knows, on some level, that they have crossed a threshold that cannot simply be mended. Their actions are wreck, ordered not only in memory but in the energetic imprint of the relationship. Every attempt to move past a betrayal without true accountability intensifies the inattention. It becomes a gnawing awareness that they have damaged something precious, something irreplaceable, and something that was offered with conscious trust and emotional openness. Shame compounds the burden of guilt. Avoidants often pride themselves on control, composure, and self-protection. To betray someone who sees beyond the surface, someone who perceives their deepest fears, their hidden patterns, their soul's truth, is to confront their own inadequacy, insecurity, and moral failure. The shame is not simply about being caught or facing judgment, it is existential. It reflects the internal recognition that they have acted against the natural order of trust, that they have violated a sacred connection, and that they are now confronted with the spiritual and emotional consequences of that violation. The shame cannot be outsourced, avoided, or minimized because it resides at the core of their being, constantly reminding them that their avoidance and betrayal have costs far greater than they imagined. This unseen prison is reinforced by the fact that avoidants struggle to process deep emotional truths. Unlike super empaths, who integrate pain into wisdom and growth, avoidants often evade introspection. They attempt to numb themselves, distract themselves, or rationalize their actions, yet the internal weight persists because it cannot be escaped without acknowledgement and transformation. The betrayal exists as a spiritual debt that demands recognition. No matter how much they try to detach from the empath or dismiss the significance of their actions, the energetic and emotional residue of the betrayal lingers, shaping their experiences, choices, and emotional responses. Moreover, the prison of guilt and shame affects their relationships beyond the original connection. Avoidants carry this invisible burden into new interactions, often unconsciously projecting fear, distrust, or defensiveness onto others. Their ability to form deep, authentic bonds is compromised because the unresolved weight of their previous betrayal prevents them from fully engaging with honesty, vulnerability, or integrity. The empath, by contrast, has transformed the betrayal into clarity, resilience, and protection, walking forward unburdened by what was meant to wound them. The avoidant remains tethered to their own choices, forced to reckon with the consequences internally, unable to recover what was lost. Even time does not diminish this burden. While ordinary relationships may allow for forgiveness or forgetting, the betrayal of a super empath imprints on the soul. The avoidant cannot erase the memory, the energy, or the inner reckoning. It is a perpetual reminder of the sacredness they violated and the permanent gap they created. This ongoing internal tension ensures that they are never truly free from the consequences of their actions. They are trapped in a cycle of reflection, self-reproach, and avoidance that only deep self-awareness and authentic transformation can address, but many never reach that level because avoidance remains their default pattern. Ultimately, the unseen prison of shame and guilt is a direct reflection of the avoidance choices. The super empath's wisdom, awareness, and transcendence highlight the gravity of the betrayal, ensuring that it cannot be forgotten or minimized. The avoidant is left with the enduring reality that trust, once violated, carries permanent consequences. Their freedom is limited not by external forces, but by the weight of their own actions, their inability to face the truth of what they have done, and the spiritual law that governs the energy of betrayal. The empath rises empowered and enlightened, while the avoidant remains confined within the invisible prison they created, forced to live with the echoes of what they cannot reclaim. Healing after betrayal is not a casual process. It is a journey. And for super empaths, it is one of transformation and elevation. Super empaths do not allow betrayal to define them. Instead, they use it as a catalyst for growth, clarity, and alignment with their higher purpose. When an avoidant betrays them, the empath feels the full weight of the violation, acknowledging the pain without denying or suppressing it. They confront the reality of what has happened and embrace the opportunity to turn it into something greater than the moment itself. While ordinary responses to betrayal might involve lingering resentment or passive avoidance, the super empath moves beyond these limited reactions. They absorb the experience, distill the lessons, and emerge stronger, wiser, and more attuned to the energies and patterns that govern human connection. This process of transformation is what makes the betrayal irretrievable for the avoidant. The avoidant cannot reclaim what they have discarded because the empath's healing is not a return to the old state. It is a forward movement into a higher level of consciousness. The empath does not merely forgive or forget, they integrate the experience into the evolution of their own soul. Their boundaries become more refined, their discernment sharper, and their understanding of human behavior more precise. The avoidant, in contrast, remains tethered to the consequences of their actions. They cannot simply apologize or attempt to reconstruct what was broken because the empath's journey has moved beyond the point where restoration is possible. The connection that was once accessible to them now exists on a plane ye cannot reach, precisely because they rejected the opportunity when it was freely offered. This one-way nature of healing is rooted in the fundamental principle of energetic alignment. Super empaths operate on the level of awareness, where intentions, actions, and consequences are deeply intertwined. When trust is violated, the empath perceives not only the immediate pain, but also the underlying patterns that led to the betrayal. They understand the motivations, fears, and avoidance mechanisms that prompted the action, and they process it fully within themselves. This allows them to move forward with clarity and purpose, rather than being stuck in cycles of emotional reactivity. The avoidant, by contrast, often lacks the capacity or willingness to process at this depth. Their avoidance and fear prevent them from fully integrating the consequences, leaving them trapped in the shadow of their own choices. Moreover, super empaths possess an innate ability to transform pain into empowerment. The betrayal that might have shattered another person becomes a source of insight and strength. They learn to recognize patterns, set stronger boundaries, and identify connections that are truly aligned with their energy and purpose. Every action of the avoidant, every violation of trust, becomes a lesson in discernment, teaching the empath how to engage more consciously with others in the future. This transformation is irreversible because it is grounded in awareness and spiritual growth. The avoidant cannot undo the clarity or resilience that emerges from this process. They have lost access to a depth of insight and power that was once theirs to experience indirectly through connection, but which they rejected. The permanence of this loss is compounded by the super empath's refusal to compromise their own integrity. Healing does not mean allowing the avoidant back into the same relational or emotional space. They honor the boundaries that were violated. They do not allow guilt, manipulation, or superficial gestures to erode the strength they have built through their processing of betrayal. In this way, their healing acts as both a shield and a declaration. The empath moves forward, fully aligned with their purpose, while the avoidant remains outside the circle of trust and intimacy they once had. Finally, the one-way door of healing emphasizes a divine principle. Growth and transformation are not contingent upon the actions of the one who caused harm. They are the result of conscious choice and alignment with truth. Super empaths embody this principle fully. Their ability to rise above betrayal, to convert it into insight, empowerment, and clarity demonstrates that healing is not reciprocal. It is personal, intentional, and transcendent. The avoidant cannot recover because they did not honor the sacredness of the connection when it mattered most. And the universe, in perfect balance, ensures that what was violated cannot be restored to those who failed to value it. The super empath moves forward, unshakable and enlightened, while the avoidant remains in the consequences of what they discarded, a vivid testament to the cost of betrayal and the enduring power of conscious, transformative healing. Thank you for trusting me with your time and energy. Your presence has truly made a difference. Goodbye for now. May your journey ahead be filled with clarity, growth, and unwavering strength.